Now, more of Illinois Rising, presented by the Illinois Policy Institute, the only show directly addressing the problems and solutions for Illinois. Now, from AM 560, here's Dan Proft.
Dan Proft back with John Tillman, President and CEO of the Illinois Policy Institute. John, interesting piece in WirePoints.
They always are.
Yeah, WirePoints it's a good little website that's adding some very provocative content as it pertains to state policy. One of the main contributors to that provocative content is a gentleman named Mark Glennon, and it's great to get these guys that actually kind of lived lives in financial services and the legal community that actually understand the scams being run in state government and how it differs from how you're obligated to behave in the private sector. And he wrote a piece about dealing with our, $6 to $10 billion in unpaid bills at present. Noted something that nobody else has noted, that right now, the Treasurer's Office, the state Treasurer's Office, has $12 billion in idle money. So rather than stockpiling cash in the Treasurer's Office, why don't we employ some of that cash to pay down some of the bills, particularly since we're paying 12% APR after 6 months on those unpaid bills? And for more on this insight, we're happy to be joined by the aforesaid Mark Glennon from WirePoints. Mark, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me back, Dan.
So, give us a synopsis of this opportunity that you happened upon to deal with some of the unpaid bills by accessing money that's there for the accessing in the Treasurer's Office.
Well, whether it's an opportunity, we'll get to in a minute, but basically there's a balance of $12.2 billion sitting in the office of the treasurer. That's a separate constitutional office, of course, and it comes from a variety of sources, mostly the income tax, but all the different funds and fees that are collected by the state. But what's odd about it is that it's basically a permanent balance. Looking back at the historical data, it hasn't dropped below $11.5 billion. That's billion with a B. And, at least since 2012, that's as far back as the Treasurer's data go. And I had been looking at it earlier than that. It was about the same in earlier years. And that has persisted with or without a budget. And there's just not a very good explanation for it. And unbelievably, well, you probably believe this, but there's nobody that has a very good explanation for it.
Seems to me that that money ought to just be moved right over the comptroller's checkbook, and she ought to start writing checks super fast. If people are really on both sides of the aisle concerned about service providers not getting paid, maybe those people who got together and sued the governor ought to be suing the treasurer to release the funds.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, maybe in part, maybe in large part. Here's the thing: a lot of that money, probably roughly half, is tied up in any of 750 specific funds. These are specific earmarked funds. Now, a lot of them go back to God knows when, and who knows whether there's any purpose in having them. A salmon fund, a quarter horse reimbursement fund, things like that you don't recognize. But some of them do make sense. They're segregated for roads, of course, are the big one that's under discussion now. Some of them are segregated because it comes in as federal grant money where there's a restricted use attached to it. So there's a partial explanation why some of it should remain tied up. But even there, still in the aggregate, why do you carry such a large balance invested very short term, mostly in deposit accounts, so it's not earning anything? It just doesn't make any sense.
So right, that's what I would get to. So it's not like there's a return on the investment to the state. It's being deployed in investment instruments that return money to the state. And what you're suggesting is, yes, some of the funds are accounted for in terms of a specific earmarking for legitimate state responsibilities, but there is a significant portion of this $12 billion that's just in a checking account waiting to be used for whatever.
Apparently, that's about $5 billion, $5 or $6 billion. The last analysis of that was done by the AP about 6 months ago. That's what they found, about $6 billion. And that's what is very difficult to get any answers on.
And Treasurer Frericks has not had any answers forthcoming?
Yeah, I did contact them and traded emails with the deputy treasurer. There are two explanations. First, he explained that situation with the funds. I get that. And his primary explanation was we don't have a budget, and these funds cannot be released absent a specific authorization or appropriation or a budget. Well, that's partially true, apparently, for some of this, but it's clearly not true because of that historical balance that's always been there.
That's
well,
right.
the other thing is you could go get a judicial decree just like they have to release other funds.
What I find fascinating, there's so much that's fascinating about this, Mark, and I really appreciate you discovering this. We had no idea, but I'm going to have my team start looking at the underlying statutory controlling documents as to how this money is handled. Because there's one thing, because I'm a little cynical sometimes. I'm just wondering where those accounts are. And which banker is holding that money? Because if you think about it, that's a lot of money for a bank to have that they are definitely deploying. I mean, they're using that money. That's that's how a bank makes money, is they use their depositors' deposit money to redeploy it and get a return on it. So I'm just curious. We should run that down. But also, one of the things that you talked about is this excuse about these are funds. That is one of the great games that politicians play, is they create a statutory requirement. This money's for a fund, salmon fund, pheasant fund, whatever, as their excuse for not taking action to change the law and actually deploy it to better, higher uses. I can't do it. It's the law. Well, you write the laws, change the damn laws, and unleash the money.
Yeah, that's exactly right. All this exists by statute. As you know, statutes can be changed by statute.
He is Mark Lennon. Read his work at Wirepoint, wirepoints.com. Mark Lennon, thanks so much for joining us again. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks.